Welcome to today's course on teleservice resources for VISTA members. This presentation was recorded in May of 2020. Here are our goals for this presentation. We'll discuss several important aspects of your day-to-day activities while teleserving. Then we'll look at a few best practices to establish early on, and we'll finish up by reviewing resources to support you while you are teleserving full-time. As our training team developed this course, we made several assumptions about your work and the conditions that you may be serving in right now. These assumptions, along with research and information provided by current sponsors, inform the content of this course. First, we assume that you are a currently serving VISTA member and you have a basic understanding of the VISTA program structure and your roles and responsibilities as a VISTA. And finally, we assume that you and your supervisor are working remotely at this time. Here's our agenda. The content of this presentation is based on research on supervising remote workers and teams from a variety of sources. Supervising and working at home are not new concepts. However, this may be a brand new experience in your work life, as well as for your supervisor and other project staff. This spring, CNCS worked with our sponsor colleagues and field staff to address a number of critical issues for the VISTA program. These are summarized in the frequently asked questions, or FAQs, posted on the CNCS website. Please be sure to check these often. Changes are made as we update policy and procedural guidance for VISTA sponsors and members. Recent updates include emergency leave for members, teleservice opportunities and requirements, and criminal history check requirements. You can find the coronavirus FAQs at nationalservice.gov/coronavirus. And please be sure to submit questions about anything you see in the FAQs to your VISTA project sponsor. Let's take a few minutes now and look at the dimensions of teleservice. That is, what it is, what's required by sponsors and members, how members are managed remotely, and some of the challenges supervisors and members are dealing with across the country. This is the definition of teleservice. Per the VISTA Member Handbook, under limited circumstances, CNCS may approve VISTA members to perform service at a project under a teleservice agreement where they can perform project-related duties from home. So basically, you're conducting your VISTA assignment description activities from home or from another remote location. VISTA's made a temporary policy exception to allow full-time teleservice by all currently serving VISTA members. The original policy limited teleservice to 2 days per pay period. Sponsors and members must ensure that teleservice agreements are in place and submitted to their state or regional CNCS office. VISTA's updated teleservice request form is posted on the VISTA campus. All the VISTA program policies, terms, and conditions remain in effect, and benefits and protections provided to VISTAs and sponsors continue as they would during service at the originally assigned site. Regarding teleservice changes in effect now, sponsors must work with their VISTAs and be sure that they agree to a modified teleservice arrangement. Sponsors must be sure that they can provide appropriate supervision if teleservice is granted, and that the member's service must be continued and must stay focused on low-income communities. Once these are established, sponsors must also work with their VISTAs to make sure the assignments can be done successfully and completed remotely. That is, that the work can actually be done. So for your service as a VISTA, please be sure that you are in close contact with your supervisor about the changes to your original VISTA assignment description, if there are any at this time. With all that's going on, please keep these things in mind. We know that the coronavirus pandemic has impacted everything we do. It's impacted how we do our work and how we live our lives. During this time, VISTAs may provide direct service, and your VISTA assignment description may be modified, of course with your agreement, to be suitable for full-time teleservice. Again, please be sure to read all of the details about changes to the work in response to the coronavirus, as well as these opportunities, in the coronavirus FAQs and discuss them with your supervisor. Here are a few key areas to consider when setting up a teleservice schedule with your supervisor. Let's discuss the teleservice agreement a bit more. We'll also look at how the VISTA assignment and the VISTA's work plan may change at this time. And then we'll finish up by looking at recommendations from human resource professionals for setting up great communications with your supervisor, as well as a productive workspace for yourself. Earlier, we talked about the required VISTA teleservice request form. It's important to know that a teleservice agreement has two equally important parts. The first is the required form that indicates both the VISTA member and the member's supervisor approve a teleservice schedule. For this form, VISTA asks and really focuses on logistics like office space, equipment, and physical safety. Once the teleservice request form is approved by a supervisor and submitted to CNCS, then that step is complete. It's a one-and-done process. The second piece of the teleservice agreement covers all other aspects of VISTA supervision, and this really will vary from project to project and member to member. Supervisors are encouraged to discuss and document their goals during teleservice and their communication and scheduling expectations at the onset of a teleservice agreement. As a VISTA member, you can be a great partner here with your supervisor. Don't hesitate to ask direct questions about their expectations for your work. For example, what time will you be required to start and end your workday? Do you need to be immediately responsive to emails, calls, or texts? Please talk these types of things through with your supervisor to make sure you understand and agree to everything that is requested by your project. Here's a summary of how to get the most out of the teleservice agreement. Be sure to document your full discussion with your schedule, tasks, and communication requirements with your supervisor. In your discussion about teleserving, also be sure to confirm the resources that you will need, including access to adequate workspace from home, a phone, computer, video capability if that's applicable to your project, and reliable internet connectivity. Put all of this in writing for you and your supervisor. And finally, be sure to set up early check-ins to gauge how well the teleservice schedule is going for you and your supervisor. With the teleservice agreement in place, it will be important to document the actual tasks you'll complete remotely, and this may include modifying your original VISTA assignment description to incorporate new or different tasks at this time. This is one way you and your supervisor may assess appropriate work for teleservice. The following ideas were adapted from the Human Resources Department at the University of Pittsburgh. Depending on your project site, many of these may be relevant for you. This can be a moment for strategic and long-term planning. Examples include updating budgets, timelines, and other planning documents, and it could include things like reading strategic plans, annual reports, or other communications from all partners and funders, and then thinking about new or different ways to engage them. If possible and relevant to your VISTA assignment, you can use this less hectic teleservice time to gather and examine data on recent work. Ask, what have we been doing in our program? What's worked well for us? What hasn't? What additional data do we need to collect? You can also take a deep dive into systems you currently have in place. This might include cleaning out your email inbox or other shared files or folders, and catching up on data entry and other backlogs. And finally, this is a good time to think about your own professional growth. You can read everything you can get your hands on, watch all the free videos or tutorials you can find, and become a Zoom expert to strengthen your online meeting facilitation skills. This spring, the VISTA management team convened meetings with all VISTA sponsors and supervisors and asked them to describe the activities their VISTAs were doing remotely now. Not surprisingly, many of the service activities are very similar to the ideas from the UPIT HR department. Many sponsors indicated that their VISTAs are focused on online communications, research, sustainability planning, and fundraising. They're also engaged in direct service activities, program planning in response to the coronavirus, curriculum development for volunteers, and their own professional development. Next, let's turn our attention to the VISTA members' work plan. The work plan really is the roadmap for the VISTA's entire term of service. Once you and your supervisor determine appropriate activities for you to do remotely, the next step is to plot out a work plan with as much detail as possible. VISTA project managers will determine the best process for developing work plans at their projects with their VISTA members. Members should write the work plans themselves, and then supervisors should review and approve them and make sure the member stays on track during the service term. Work plans are built from the VISTA assignment description. The VAD is the starting point for a work plan. The format of the work plan will vary across the different projects and different needs for members and supervisors. There are tools like templates that exist in Word or Excel, and project management tools like Basecamp or Smartsheet that can be very helpful to establish a work plan. But no matter what format or what tool is used by a particular project, the VISTA work plan should include the elements that you see here. The highlighted element at the bottom of this screen is the incremental steps section. This is by far the most complex and time-consuming step in the process to create for the work plan. But once it's done, a detailed work plan like this can help you track your progress, accomplishments, and challenges throughout your service year. Let's take a look at how to build a work plan from a VISTA assignment description. Here you can see the objective and list of activities in the VAD for something called the AmeriCorps Volunteer Coordinator position. It's good to know this is a training example only. This isn't a real VAD. It's been adapted from several different assignments over the years. In this example, the project goal is to help children of incarcerated parents receive the educational, social, and emotional support they need to break the cycle of poverty. The VISTA member will build the capacity of the County Community Services Agency by setting up outreach systems, building partnerships with organizations, and developing marketing materials to promote the mentor program. The VAD's goal and objective are clear, and the member activities here do include some detail and deadlines. To build out a full work plan from this, we would take each activity and slice it up into incremental steps needed to complete it. So let's take a look first at what those first elements of a work plan in this example would look like. So here you can see the VISTA position title, the names of the VISTA member and their supervisor, and you can see the date the work plan was completed, was just about a month after the member started. This part of the plan also describes how it will be used and updated throughout the service term. It'll be a standing discussion item at regular VISTA supervisor check-ins. The VISTA will update the plan in writing quarterly, and there are dates given here to show when that's going to occur. They'll also update it as part of a final written report. And then the VISTA and supervisor will discuss that final report at the exit interview. This example also helpfully defines the performance standards expected when the VISTA is completing those tasks. The standards here address verbal and written communication, meeting deadlines, and responsiveness to supervisor feedback. Again, here I think you can really help your supervisor clarify the standards that they expect from you at the start of your service year, and then keep those in mind for the rest of your time together. On this graphic, you can see the incremental steps associated with that are needed to complete that first member activity listed in the VAD. And that first activity was to identify the skills, abilities, and experiences sought in volunteer mentors by January 31st, 2020. That activity is listed in the top left side of this chart. In the second column over, you can see that to complete that specific activity, that one activity, the VISTA will need to complete a number of incremental steps, including researching other mentor programs, assessing the needs of the AmeriCorps program, the VISTA project program, drafting a volunteer position description, getting feedback on that draft from multiple folks, and then revising the position description by the deadline. Each of those incremental steps here, as you can see, has its own deadline and the relevant staff or resources that are needed in order to complete that incremental step. So a complete work plan would include this level of detail for each activity listed in the VAD, as well as incorporate any new information that VISTA receives once they begin service. Here are a few tips to get the most out of your work plan. First of all, please go extreme on the level of detail. You cannot overplan here in this work planning process. Definitely break out every possible incremental step that's needed to accomplish the project goals. And as we just saw in the example, set incremental deadlines that accompany those steps. This will help you see all of the work you have to do over the course of your term and help you build out strong project management skills yourself. Also be sure the work plan includes all 12 months of your VISTA service term. As we saw in the example, you want to strive to get this work plan at least drafted in your first month of service and then use it again as a roadmap as you go through your entire term. And definitely keep the work plan alive. Use it constantly to track your work and document your accomplishments, any challenges you face, or project changes. Again, I think this type of work plan is a phenomenal record for you and your supervisor to have at the end of your service term. It's helpful to assess your work, as well as it's extremely helpful for project sustainability or transfer to future VISTA members who may be coming on, project staff, or volunteers. So we've talked about setting up a comprehensive teleservice agreement and building out a detailed work plan as part of this process. The final piece of the teleservice puzzle is establishing effective communication. In the research VISTA did to prepare this course, one of the topics that loomed the largest for nonprofits, businesses, and universities was the importance of supervisor and staff communication. For our purposes today, we're going to talk about organizational culture, individual styles and preferences, schedules and meetings, and managing miscommunication or conflict. Before we get started, please keep one thing in mind, and this is a universal truth about teleserving or teleworking. Working remotely takes more time. It is a fact of life that it takes more time to actually do our own work, and it definitely takes more time to talk about and then do any kind of work with other people. So that means really that our individual and our collective productivity is impacted. And for you, it could mean that it's going to take more time for your supervisor or your colleagues at your project site to answer questions that you may have or to get back to you on things that you need. Here are a few recommendations from HR professionals. To start with, it's important that supervisors replicate aspects of the project's organizational culture remotely in any way that they can. And if you are a new VISTA member at your project, the organizational culture may not yet be clear to you, especially if you have not yet started to serve at your office. Again, here I think you can be a good partner with your supervisor. Ask them direct questions to build your understanding and communication. Ask things like, what is the culture of your office? How does your project staff connect informally and formally? How can I take part in office routines, rituals, or other activities at this time? These types of questions, again, I think are particularly important if you are a brand new VISTA and you're actually starting your service year from your home. Next, be sure to talk about your communication style and preferences with your supervisor and ask them to do the same with you. The key here is for you to be extremely self-aware and open to working with a supervisor who may communicate very differently from you. If you're a brainstormer, let's bounce a few ideas around person, it's important to share that with your supervisor. And it's very important for you to know if your supervisor is that way as well, or if they have a different communication style. Definitely talk about how you communicate, see how your supervisor communicates, see what you guys have in common and what you don't. And again, try to be as open as you can to working with different styles. While teleserving for an extended time, it may be important to communicate some personal information that would not ordinarily come up or be shared in an office setting. For example, right now with the coronavirus, if you have homeschooling or other caregiving responsibilities during the day at your home, please convey your schedule needs to your supervisor. Or if you're struggling with something like insomnia because of the stress of your responsibilities at home or the stress of the coronavirus pandemic, let your supervisor know about the insomnia or the stress and talk together with them about how to manage that along with your project responsibilities. Now, it's definitely up to you to decide what you will or will not share with your supervisor. You are in no way required to disclose private details about your life, but I do think it's important to be really thoughtful about this, particularly at this time in the spring of 2020, and try to give your supervisor whatever information you think is most important to build and maintain that strong communication with them. Human resource professionals also stress the importance of establishing regular or recurring meetings with your supervisor and looking for spontaneous opportunities to check in as well. One very specific tip here that appears everywhere in the research on working remotely is that you should lean more on talking on the phone when you're working remotely, or video chatting if that's something that you can do or that you would want to do. So talk on the phone or video chat with your supervisor as much as you can, instead of having most of your communications via email or some other written method. I know this can be a real challenge for how folks work, and it definitely takes time, I would say, and patience to adjust to that system. Finally, working remotely may cause misunderstandings or full-blown conflicts between coworkers, including between supervisors and VISTAs. Again, here's where I think your self-awareness and communication skills are so important. For example, if you hear a tense exchange in a meeting, follow up right away with a call or an instant message with those folks. A quick message like, "Hey, are you doing okay?" may open the door for your supervisor or your coworker to tell you about challenges they're having or help that they need. Again, full-time teleservice may be totally new to you or your VISTA project staff and your supervisor. As I've said, it takes time and patience and real generosity to succeed in this situation. But we know you can do this. VISTA members have a great capacity for getting things done, and they always are working in challenging situations and often lacking all of the resources that they want or that they need. So we know you can do this, and I hope this presentation gives you some ideas for ways that you can engage with your supervisor and move forward with them. So right now, you may be wondering, how is everyone else handling this? How are VISTAs and their supervisors handling full-time teleservice for an extended period? Recently, our management team asked sponsors to tell us about any challenges they were having. In all, we got about 450 comments from several hundred sponsors, and the challenges they described fell into these broad categories. The first was the emotional impact or the emotional toll that so much working at home and working alone is taking. Sponsors described challenges with having appropriate workspace or access to resources needed to work full-time for them or their VISTAs. They also described challenges with VISTA members who don't have a lot of professional experience yet and don't seem to know how to write or speak professionally while in this remote work environment. And finally, sponsors talked about having a lot of challenges with finding enough full-time work for members to do from home. The most frequent challenges, the most frequent responses to our questions identified were variations of these top two items here, the emotional impact and then having adequate work for VISTAs. The emotional impact on members described includes stress about home life or family, loss of part-time income the VISTAs were counting on to be able to serve in VISTA, fear of future job prospects after their VISTA service, isolation definitely from the project site and from other VISTAs for folks that were serving before the pandemic hit us, and then lack of focus at this time. Supervisors also described running out of things for their VISTAs to do at home, not being able to adapt that VISTA assignment description to the new needs or the emerging needs of their agency or their community, and also struggling to see and finding out that the current VISTA or VISTAs on their project right now don't seem to have the right skills or attitude to adjust to those new or emerging needs in their community. So here's a summary of steps to take now to try to get the most out of your teleservice experience. In addition to the planning and communications with your supervisor discussed earlier, these steps can also help you avoid the challenges we already know about from VISTA sponsors. Again, those top challenges, which are the emotional or social toll that remote work or teleservice is taking, and then the lack of full-time work for a full week or for several weeks. To address the emotional toll of remote work, make a full schedule for yourself each work day. Establish that schedule early and then be faithful to it, as faithful as you can be with everything going on in your life. A pro tip here, again from the research that we did for today's presentation, says to make sure that in that schedule you are intentionally building in time for rest breaks, rest stops, or just downtime for yourself. Build in some time for exercise if that's something you want to do, or even just something to give you a change of scenery. Write it down. At 12 o'clock, I am going to walk around the block. At 12 o'clock, I'm going to throw a ball for my dog. And also, if it's appropriate for you and your life as well as your work, your VISTA project life, add a little time in the day for socializing, something with your coworkers, even your family or friends, just to give you an emotional break. That is definitely as important as any work tasks that you would be accomplishing at this time. And finally, to address the issue of not having enough work to do and wanting to build your own professional skills, you can use this time to your advantage to fill your schedule with diverse learning opportunities. On the screen in front of you now, you can see a link to a video for your workspace planning. It's about a 4-minute video. Definitely when you end this course, go to this video because it's delightful. And it's brief and really, really specific about how to make your remote workspace effective. I think it's also important, if you haven't already, talk to your supervisor about the best way to target your professional development, right? For your project and for your service and your experience. What is the best research you should be conducting? What are the things you should be reading? What are the online training opportunities that would be most valuable, again, for you personally as a professional and also for your project? I think it's good to note, as you can see on the slide here, there are so many free learning opportunities, many of them very brief videos, brief tutorials, short articles, so many free things online at sites like LinkedIn Learning or TED Talks. The two links that you see here, the LinkedIn Learning, Are You New to Working Remotely? These resources can help. That's a great course. Also, again, very brief, but really, really helpful. And then I think the TED Talk, How to Connect with People Who Are Different Than You, I think is really, really useful at this particular moment because of our remote teleservice and telework schedules. And of course, generally, I think in your VISTA service, this is going to be a skill that you will hone or really build from the ground up. Here are a few more final recommendations for what to do with this information. I think if you haven't already, review the list of teleservice resources that are on the VISTA campus. Again, definitely check in with your supervisor early, check in often about everything we've talked about today, including the agreement itself, both of those parts, the form as well as the management expectations. Talk about your VISTA assignment description, what's changed there, if anything. Work together on building out or updating your work plan. And then definitely explore with them the best ways to target your professional development during this time. And definitely please feel free to send questions about this course to the VISTA training team at vistatraining@cns.gov. This is just a screenshot of those resources on Teleservice that are posted on the VISTA campus. There are links to great articles, tutorials, and videos on teleworking and supervising remote workers here. As you can see, the list is posted on the supervisor page, and it absolutely applies to member service as well. I think it's good to know, looking at this list, that most of these links are to single articles. They're brief and kind of quick to absorb. If you were going to go through this whole list that's on the VISTA campus, it'll take you about an hour just to read those links, the articles linked here, or watch the videos. And of course, if you have more time, within each of these resources, there are even more pages, even more links to recommendations and lessons learned from working or supervising remotely. There are great tools like telework manuals or policies or tips for you while you're doing it, as well as for your supervisor. So in this course, we've identified key elements of VISTA's day-to-day activities needed during full-time teleservice. We've recommended best practices for working remotely, and then we've reviewed a few resources to support teleserving VISTA members at this time. Thank you for completing the Teleservice Resources for VISTA Members course.